Welcome to the Europe-Africa Business Forum 2022 high-level panel on youth and entrepreneurship. My name is Ms. Treasure Maphanga. I'm the Director and the Chief Operating Officer of the African Electronic Trade Group, and I have the great pleasure of being your moderator for today's session. Before we get started, I would just like to make a few short housekeeping announcements, especially to guide the audience that is joining us virtually. We'll be using English as the lingua franca for the session. Translation is provided in English and Spanish. However, we will have also some speakers who may wish to intervene in French, and they're welcome to do so. During the session, for technical reasons, panelists and speakers will be the only ones to have access to the microphone alongside the moderator. And should you have questions or comments, please feel free to use the chat. And as you do so, your messages need to be addressed to everybody, and ensure that you also indicate to whom you're posing the question, and also to introduce yourself and your organization as well. Now, we will do our best, of course, to answer all the questions, regrouping them as necessary, and I'm glad that I have some support for that. And I will invite participants to send their questions after each intervention on the panel as we proceed, and not wait until the end of the session. Now, the whole idea of being gathered here is to spark a discussion between panelists on how to bridge the finance, investment, and skills gaps and make youth and entrepreneurship development work for a stronger EU-Africa partnership. Now, to open the session, we have two keynote speakers. The first that I'm honored to introduce to you is Her Excellency, Ms. Jutta Urpilainen, who is the European Commissioner for International Partnerships at the European Commission. And she will be joining us online, and we want to welcome her. But just one word, somebody who deserves no introduction, but it's important for all the audiences around the world to also take note that we have with the Commissioner a Finnish politician who has distinguished herself and was the first female chairman of the Social Democratic Party of Finland, which she led from 2008 to 2014. And as of the 1st of December 2019, she is a commissioner in charge of international partnerships in the European Commission. We're very honored and want to ask her to take the floor in a moment. But before I do, I'd like to introduce the second commissioner. We have the keynote speaker, His Excellency, Dr. Mohamed Belhocine, who is with us in studio today. We welcome you, Your Excellency. Commissioner for Education, Science and Technology and Innovation at the African Union Commission. And Dr. Belhocine is an Algerian medical scientist and professor of internal medicine and epidemiology. He has, of course, served in his country at the international level in organizations such as the WHO and UNDP. And we are very glad to have him grace our occasion today. Now, before I move further, I just want to set a little bit the context, because this discussion takes place in the context of an EU small and medium-sized enterprise strategy, an African Union SME strategy together with African Union Agenda 2063, and the recently operationalized African Continental Free Trade Area. These in many ways provide the umbrella of policies for youth, women, and entrepreneurship development. So, Excellencies, to get to the gist of the matter, each of you are going to give us your thoughts on what are the priority actions needed for harnessing the youth and entrepreneurs' potential for economic growth during this period of high unemployment and economic disruption, especially exacerbated by the impact of COVID-19. Let's start by the European Commission, the institution that is hosting us today. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, dear friends, colleagues. Let me start with a couple of numbers. As a former finance minister, I like figures. So today, 60% of Africa's population is under 25 years old. The continent is a driver of global growth And of course, youth are one of its biggest assets. By 2035, 450 million young Africans will arrive on the job market. 450 million young people, more than we have inhabitants in the European Union at the moment. But only 100 million new jobs will be created, and that's the challenge. So numbers tell it all. To tap into the potential of these new generations, we need to help them to find decent jobs. First, we need to give Africa's young entrepreneurs the tools to succeed. Most of them have difficulty raising funds in the early stages of their businesses. We need to make sure that they can receive support to develop their businesses from local banks and private investors. And this is why the European Union and its member states are working on a Team Europe initiative, investing in young businesses in Africa. So through this initiative, more than 4.6 billion euros are already backing this effort. The political summit this week, actually starting today, will discuss the Global Gateway Africa-Europe investment package, which our President von der Leyen announced during our joint mission to Dakar, Senegal last week. This investment package will attract 150 billion euros more in investment in areas like energy, digitalization, but also stimulating decent jobs in these areas. So this will create countless opportunities for Africa's young people. My second point is that we must prepare students today with the skills for the jobs of tomorrow. And this is why the EU will invest around 500 million euros in vocational education and training programs in Africa from the years 2021 till 2027. Because we must ensure that education and training really match the needs of the labor market. And our VET toolbox will strengthen the relationship between skills provision and the private sector. I am delighted that experts from a wide variety of backgrounds are with us to discuss these issues today, and I very much look forward to hearing their views on these crucial topics. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Thank you for your strong message. And we also wish to appreciate the significant contribution that you have announced of 5 million euros between 2021 to 2027 in education and training. I'm sure that this will have tremendous impact on the challenges that you have so eloquently outlined in your message. Let me, at this juncture, request Dr. Mohamed Belhocine to take the floor. Commissioner.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody, Excellencies, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. It's my pleasure as a Commissioner in charge of Education, Science and Technology and Innovation to join you at this high-level panel on youth and entrepreneurship. Indeed, it's very important for us to explore support and opportunities available for African MSMEs post-COVID pandemic recovery and how to make economic growth inclusive for youth. We all know that African MSMEs make up the majority of our enterprise in the continent, both informal and formal, and they significantly contribute to sustainable and inclusive economic growth and development in Africa. MSMEs are critical in addressing unemployment, as was said before, and underemployment challenges for which young people bear the greatest brunt. It was said by my predecessors, 55% of Africa's population is comprised of youth, and over 35% are aged between 15 and 35 years. This is our greatest and unique asset, which, if strategically capitalized, will contribute to unlocking the potential of the continent and gradually transform it into a modern and powerful continent with attractive economic growth rates and highest returns on investment. But this cannot happen without investing in human capital, youth and skills development. This can't happen without us formulating policies, programs, and putting in place institutional arrangements that strengthen and improve national capacities of our countries to boost the micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises so that they play a critical role in job creation, income generation, and entrepreneurship development, with the youth as the ultimate beneficiaries. Youth participating in MSMEs ecosystems need enabling environments and appropriate skills. They need access to sufficient resources, and it was mentioned before, markets for their enterprises to grow and survive. The requisite skills include, amongst others, leveraging digital skills, financial skills, communication skills, leadership, creativity, innovation, networking, and MSMEs also need affordable access to localized and customized business management information and training infrastructure to enable them flourish. Ladies and gentlemen, to address this youth entrepreneurship, the EU Commission has adopted strategic socio-economic development frameworks around the Continental Blueprint Agenda 2063. We have African Youth Charter. We have the Continental Education Strategy for Africa. Our education strategy calls for quality and relevant education, training, and research as core for scientific and technological innovation, creativity, and entrepreneurship. Furthermore, the Commission pays special attention to technical and vocational education and training to foster youth participation in the economic mainstream, particularly encouraging a paradigm shift in the mindset from job seeking to job creation. Emphasis is on supporting creativity, innovation, and entrepreneurship. Some of the concrete interventions include the Skills Initiative for Africa to strengthen occupational prospects of young people in Africa, a program that is supported by the European Union and the German government. We are running an Innovating Education in Africa program that aims at identifying, promoting, and supporting the systemic adoption and replication of education innovations in education and training in Africa. Obviously, this has to be boosted after the COVID pandemic. We established the Pan-African University, which also hosts an Innovation Challenge program that aims at raising the awareness of students and alumni on innovation and promote entrepreneurship mindset in Africa. We also have Be Changemaker Africa, a social entrepreneurship acceleration program for young Africans in partnership with World Skills International and with HP Computers. The program has an element on skills development with tools and technology for startup acceleration, dedicated coaching, mentoring, and customized support. Additionally, through the African Union Development Agency, NEPAD, we are working with the private sector to provide customized entrepreneurial training and financing to 100,000 MSMEs in the continent. These are among the initiatives that need strengthening to create a sizable engine of decent employment generation through MSMEs and contribute to sustainable development in Africa. But let's face it, an international organization like ours or like the European Union can't do it alone because we don't have territories. The territories are in the hands of governments, are in the hands of civil society organizations, are in the hands of the private sector. So they have to be all together if we want to succeed in this endeavor to make MSMEs a good driver for economic and social development in our continents. In conclusion, I want to say that the EU Commission stands ready to cooperate with strategic partners, as I was saying, to support MSMEs through appropriate skills development, training, to enhance their sustainability and their resilience from shocks such as the one we had with the COVID-19 pandemic. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Commissioner, for your comprehensive remarks, sharing with us and the audience that has joined us the tremendous efforts that the African Union is making to address the challenges that we are all very conscious of. And we want to also appreciate the fact that the African Union is calling for partnerships, strategic partnerships, to address the opportunities which arise from the challenges that you have also comprehensively outlined. So, and we are very happy that we will have both commissioners, I hope, to be able to stay with us as we now go into, I hope, a very lively discussion on the issues that you have set out in the context of the first part of our program. Now, it's my honor and pleasure to introduce to you this panel that is going to focus on youth and entrepreneurship from very diverse perspectives. I have the pleasure of introducing them. We have three of our panelists joining us online, and the rest of us are here physically in the studio. And so I would like to just briefly tell you just a few words about them, because their bios are available, and they are really remarkable individuals from both Africa and Europe. Now, we have, first of all, Mr. Randy Koussou Alam-Sogan, who is the CEO of the Black Lion Fund. He is a person who has been at the heart of the Black Lion Holdings Group, which specializes in project financing, large investment ventures, and impact investments. We understand that we have in Prince Randy a Pan-Africanist vision and a philanthropist and also a business leader that is joining our panel today. So we want to welcome you. You're joining us virtually today. The second panelist I'd like to introduce is Ms. Nyama Gusona Marvel. Marvel is a human rights activist and as well as a consultant on youth empowerment. And since 2019, I understand that she has started a youth-led digital initiative which uses digital tools to amplify the achievements and voices of African youth and women. So we want to welcome you, Marvel. And next we have Ms. Cynthia Aïssy, Managing Director of Keyops. Cynthia is joining us online, and we want to just briefly say that since 2017, she has been managing the first company to digitalize the transport of parcels between African cities. And this is, I think, a very interesting experience that she brings. Indeed, I believe she was also working for one of the pioneers of e-commerce, Jumia Travel, where she has developed expertise on digital ecosystems in Africa. Welcome to you, Cynthia. Next, we have Mr. Robert Sanders, who's here with us in the studio. He's right on my left. Robert is a team leader for the European Union Big Africa program, and which is an initiative that DG INTPA initiative that is supporting business incubation across Eastern and Southern Africa. And Robert, with us here in this panel, represents the European Business and Innovation Center Network, leading association of business support organizations, and which connects with global partners that comprising of executives and industry leaders. So you're most welcome, Robert. Next, we have Ms. Hilda Kragha, who is Managing Director of Rome Africa. Rome Africa runs the largest career platform, working with 10 million job seekers, I understand, and 100,000 employers. And the mission that Hilda is working towards is to upscale job seekers and connect them to the right opportunities. And I believe at the moment you're in Nigeria, Ghana, Senegal, Uganda, and Tanzania, and hopefully very soon in more countries. Now, next, we have Mr. Stefan Moritz, who is representing a panelist who was not able to join us today, but he's very welcome as the Managing Director of the European Entrepreneurs, CEA-PME, and also head of the EU Liaison Office of BVMW in Brussels. Mr. Moritz brings with him extensive experience on EU-funded economic development projects with international partners network from all over the continent. And we also have on our panel Mr. Gregory Clemente, and we want to welcome him. He's joined us online. He's the Chief Executive Officer of Proparco, a private sector financing arm of Agence Française de Développement. He is also bringing with him vast experience and perspectives in finance and banking and, the things that make the world go round, as the business people would say. Then last but not least, we have an amazing entrepreneur, Mr. Pablo Ruiz Múzquiz, CEO and founder of Kaleidos and initiator of Frena de la Curva. Pablo has a scientific, technical, academic background that he brings to this amazing world of open source hacktivist trend? Yeah, for 20 years he's been doing this. And he has participated in the design and development of more than 30 large technological projects. So, Pablo, it's a great pleasure to have you with us today. So you can see we have a large panel, ladies and gentlemen. I'll ask all the speakers to be concise as we discuss some very important questions, because time, unfortunately, is not on our side, but we still have the opportunity in the next 40 minutes to further understand how we can bridge the finance, investment and skills gaps, making youth entrepreneurship development work for a stronger EU-Africa partnership. So, now that we have had this wonderful context that has been set by our commissioners, let us look into the policy framework. And I'm going to ask Mr. Stefan Moritz to start us off, because we would like to appreciate if you can shed some light on what do you believe are the key implementation highlights of the AU-EU partnership on business, job creation and entrepreneurship, and also how well are the existing umbrella policy frameworks calibrated to support the distinct needs of entrepreneurs, youth and MSMEs? Should you, do you think that these frameworks are adequate, or do they need to be updated? Over to you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Maphanga. Also, thank you very much for the invitation to our confederation. I have to speak into the microphone, of course, and thank you also to Mrs. Urpilainen and Mr. Belhocine to join us today in this interesting panel, which is for us as European entrepreneurs one of the central topics that are needed to develop entrepreneurship and MSMEs in Africa, as well as the activity, the exchange, the business relationship with between European SMEs and African SMEs. As a confederation, we run since several years so-called EU African SME summits and online business labs. We exchange intensively with partners in Africa in the field of women entrepreneurship, in the field of shared value creation, in the field of intra-African and international intercontinental trade with the Pan-African Chamber of Commerce and Industry. And we have recently in our SME summit in Rome and Dakar last year in October tried to spell out a little bit the cornerstones of the strategies that the European Union and the African Union, have started to define, and especially the AU-EU Youth Partnership, which this time is focused exactly on job creation, business and entrepreneurship. We welcome this idea and also, of course, the provisions, the financial provisions. Very much, especially because they are focused, as the title says, on entrepreneurship. Let me maybe a little bit only point out what would be, let's say, the most important cornerstones that here have to be taken into account based on our experience as small and medium-sized enterprises. The training of entrepreneurs in schools is nearly impossible. What is really needed is the experiential learning in that field. Often, of course, entrepreneurship is a question of personal mentality, of risk availability, risk readiness, let's say, of, let's say, also copying role models that comes often from the family. And also maybe then during the professional training. And especially professional training, which has a very strong element of work-based learning, experiential learning, project learning, is very useful to not only learn technical or theoretical skills, but to learn how to manage a process, how to manage a team, how to have leadership, how to manage in time, deliver in time, how to make quality sure, and all that. These aspects are only possible to be learned when you practice them. Yeah. So the practical aspects are very important. So every investment that the European Union or the African Union do, I would invite the commissioners to make sure that at least a large part of the funds are dedicated to work-based experiential and project learning. And that's also, let's say, a little bit from our experience as, of course, also German small and medium-sized enterprise with the dual training system, which allows us, let's say, to say we have a very strong class of small and medium-sized entrepreneurs which are resilient and sustainable in the sense they are focusing on winning the challenge. They are focusing on making it possible to continue to work as an entrepreneur. And that goes over decades, not only, let's say, until the next financial round or maybe for selling the startup that you have set up in the shortest time possible to a big investor. So we advocate strongly to support SMEs. And in this sense also, I would like to say the 450 million youth in the next 20 years which are looking for a job in Africa. We must first of all think to train the trainers in the sense of train the entrepreneurs. Create more entrepreneurs, make them, bring them into the formality of law on the market. I mean, in Africa, you have already a huge amount of entrepreneurs, but 80% of them are informal. We have to set up the political environment, the political and legal rules that make it possible that they can step by step get into the formality without big problems. So with lower taxes, with lower obligations, with a few with red tape and so on, so in order that they can step by step become a more formal entrepreneur, and in this way also give jobs to others, because if you have 45 million entrepreneurs in Africa, you have jobs for 455 people. And what about the financial aspect this panel is focusing very much on? I would also remind that, let's say, for migration when people are really desperate, family, fools and friends often find the starting capital, let's say, to go abroad if necessary. Nothing against that, but of course this starting capital could be also used for setting up a company. Often it is very few things that you need. You need some €1,000 to buy a fridge or a solar panel to produce your products and bring them to a market. Let me close with the very high importance that we give also to women, supporting women entrepreneurship, because women are a great resource which are not yet sufficiently seen, especially in entrepreneurs' roles, deciding also for teams. They have a totally different approach. They're normally like flat hierarchies and more team spirit, and that motivates also very much, and that's also why we absolutely support here any kind of program that will help also women entrepreneurs to be active. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for sharing your insights and experience as an organization on the issues at hand, the challenge of matching skills with jobs and what needs to be done about that. And also the key message I took away was how to make it easy for entrepreneurs and MSMEs in Africa to be formal, how to create that enabling environment through policies and other administrative processes. So thank you very much. Now I'd like to look into the role of the private sector, and I'd like to turn now to Mr. Prince Randy, who is going to tell us and share his thoughts on how do you believe the private sector, through the leadership of company CEOs, how can you provide targeted support to business startups? And what are some of the best practices and mentoring programs that you have been working with in terms of addressing this challenge of ensuring that we have the right match of skills with the employment opportunities? And perhaps also, if you have any further thoughts about what it is that could be done in the EU-Africa cooperation to scale up the work that's already being done. So over to you, Prince Randy. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Treasurer, for the introduction. And I am honored to be on this panel. I was invited by Dr. Amani Asfour, and of course, with the approval of the EU Commission and the African Commission. So I'm very thankful to be on this panel. As Her Excellency Ms. Urpilainen have said before, we have to harness the vast power that Africa's youth represent. And I'm also very thankful that the EU Commission has this initiative to bring in 500 million euros of investment into Africa for the next few years. Now, I just want to give a little bit of context. In the past 11, 12 years, our main activity has been to finance and invest in large infrastructure projects on the continent in energy, like power plants and roads, airports, ports, factories, and so on, and large industrial scale agricultural development, which we are still doing. This is our main activity, to bring in massive capital to African countries, to the governments that need to develop their infrastructure, and to the private sector that needs to grow also in terms of having the right logistics and the right infrastructure to develop their products and their services. So that's our main activity. We have not been investing in small youth a project or companies, which is what now, in the past year, we have come up with the initiative to create the first Women Empowerment Fund. It's called actually the Siren International Women Empowerment Fund for Africa. So we are starting in June. We are launching in June officially with $300 million of committed capital. And our target is to reach $1 billion for Africa mainly, but also we are considering the Middle East, Latin America, the Caribbean, and Asia. Because we know that particularly in Africa, there's a big gap for women in the financial market. They cannot have access to finance and investment as men or as in general compared to other parts of the world. So if we can bridge that gap, I think we can easily add at least 25% to the GDP of African countries. And this fund will also benefit the youth, by the way. It's not just women. It will be mainly women entrepreneurs, women who have project innovation, solutions for Africa's problems, things that are needed, but also, of course, the youth, whether they're men or women. The main solution for all these problems we are discussing today is funding, is finance, is money. So if we can structure those funds and we can have the right way to manage it, to invest directly in those youth, in those businesses, I think we can make a lot of progress. I've identified three main problems with the youth in Africa. First of all, there's inadequacy in the education system today. We need to have, as my predecessor just said, we need to match, the current and future economy. What is needed in the current and future economy is the jobs of today. We need to match that to the education that we are teaching our young people in the schools. Most education systems in Africa are outdated. They are not prepared for the future. They're not prepared for AI, for machine learning, for all of those things, for biotech, for blockchain and so on, for robotics. So we have to try to work together with the African Union and the EU Commission to see how we can learn from best practices in European countries, in American countries, and in Asia, on how we can bring in those new skills and those new training techniques and all these beautiful industries that are developing today, how we can bring that into Africa and make our youth benefit from that so they can be prepared for the new jobs of the future and not just learning theories and philosophies in schools. So the other main thing is that there's a political problem. There's a mismatch between what the youth is expecting and what they represent on the African countries and their political leaders. There are some exceptions, of course, but from my own observations, I've seen that our political leaders are completely disconnected from the youth, from the reality of the African youth, which is their largest constituency. So we have to fix that. And thirdly, there's been a big migration problem. This migration problem is by, of course, a lack of jobs, a lack of opportunities, a political instability. So it's in the interest of the EU itself to make sure that those funds can be driven into Africa to create jobs locally in Africa, to create the right environment, the right infrastructure, and so on, so that we can avoid the problems we are facing today across the Mediterranean, when thousands of people are dying every year trying to cross over to find jobs, to have a better life. This is a shameful situation for us as Africans. We should not be allowed that to happen, and European Union also should not be allowing that to happen. So the solution for it is to structure those funds, to make sure we use them well, to create the jobs, by providing infrastructure, by developing the agricultural sector, the industrial sector. People are working in those things, in those projects. So we are creating jobs anyway by doing that. Now, with regards to SMEs and micro enterprises, as I said, our contribution from now on, I regret that we have not started this earlier, but our contribution from now on is to create this new investment fund for women empowerment and the youth, starting in June, which we are launching in Egypt, and you'll all be invited. Dr. Amani Asfour is a key instrumental person, as we will be doing a lot of collaboration with the Africa Business Council in this initiative. So my personal experience, as I said, I've not, as a fund, we have not been focused mainly on youth. We are starting that now, but as a person, I've always mentored a lot of young entrepreneurs who come to me with projects, who come to me with requests for, ideas on how they can improve their businesses or their business concept and so on. So on a personal level, I'm doing that. I have also my own foundation, which is called Shout of the Universe.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Prince Randy. I think what you have done in answering to my questions has actually exceeded my expectations. You are not just talking about the challenges and the solutions, but you're also putting money on the table and you're committing. And this is commendable. We want to appreciate the great work that you're doing together with the African Business Council, Dr. Amani Asfour and others, in calling for the investment in women entrepreneurs as well as the youth in order to address the challenges. And I like the fact that you're focusing on innovation, because there is an abundance of innovation across the continent. And I think well-structured funds, as you've said, well-managed, targeting and investing directly in the beneficiaries is exactly what everybody is looking for. Thank you very much. Let me move then, without further ado, to now looking at skills and jobs for all. And I would like to now invite, in fact, a number of panelists to respond to the same question so that we can also move along faster. So please target your comments on your own perspectives on this question. I'm calling on Ms. Nyama, Marvel, also Robert Sanders, Hilda, and Pablo. And I'm going to give you each a turn to respond to the following question. How, through public-private partnerships, can capacity development and mentorship programs for young entrepreneurs be improved? This is the first question. And I'd like you, as you respond to the question, to share some lessons learned from your successful collaborations with different stakeholders, such as the private sector and investors, for generating opportunities for young people. So I'd like to ask Marvel, could you please take the floor first? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Treasure. This is actually an important question. And first of all, we cannot talk about youth entrepreneurship, we cannot talk about youth as a whole without mentioning Africa, because Africa is the youngest continent in terms of its youthful population. And we also have to acknowledge that African youths face a lot of challenges, ranging from inadequate mentorship opportunities, lack of funding, and even the COVID-19 pandemic that has affected each and every one of us. But the greatest challenge that African youths face is in terms of skills building. It's in terms of the skills needed to take their businesses to the next level. And there are several initiatives that have been developed to really bridge the skills gap in Africa, several initiatives that are aiming to provide mentorship and support to African entrepreneurs. And I always jokingly actually say that if you were to Google, if you were to do a quick Google search and search for entrepreneurship opportunities for African youth, you will be slapped in the face with so many opportunities and so many programs and so many initiatives that are running concurrently to address the issues of skills in Africa. But I think that at a certain point, it's very important for all of us to stop and take a step back and ask ourselves if those initiatives are actually addressing the needs of African entrepreneurs. And because what most of these initiatives do is that they prepare a mentorship plan, they prepare a curriculum, or they prepare a skills building plan, and they present it to African youth saying, hey, this is what we are sure that you need. We are assuming that these are the skills that you need to advance your businesses, instead of actually consulting with African youth throughout the entire process. Because I believe that nobody knows the challenges faced by an African entrepreneur better than an African entrepreneur herself or himself. So it's very important that throughout all of these processes, throughout the development of these skills building initiatives and mentorship packages and everything that is being offered to support entrepreneurs, it's very important that entrepreneurs are included throughout the entire process. And this goes the same with policies too. During the development of policies, economic reform policies, especially post-COVID-19, it's very important to have entrepreneurs included in these conversations. So I really believe that if we want to support African entrepreneurs, we have to learn to listen to them and to include them throughout the entire process. If we want an economic growth to be inclusive for youth, then we have to learn to include young people in all conversations and in tables, and give them seats at tables where economic policies are being drafted that will affect them and their businesses. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'm so glad you are here to make this point and remind us, because it is so important to ensure that the youth not only have the voice, but they are participating in shaping the solutions. Thank you very much, Marvel. Now I'd like to ask Robert Sanders to take the floor on this question. Thank you.
Thank you, Treasure, and thanks again for the invitation to enjoy this high-level panel. And I certainly agree with your comments. Yes, the first thing is, what is the problem and how can we help? And as you mentioned, Treasure, EBN, we represent now around 200 organisations, but possibly more importantly, 800 and plus experienced practitioners, incubator managers, innovation experts. And this, I think, is a valuable human capital. And certainly our members, we're ready to help, and we're also willing to learn. And also we want to work with some of our African peers to obviously help mentor young entrepreneurs. And just a bit of context, so we were indeed invited by DG International Partnerships to set up BIC Africa, which is funded by the EU, and a regional network supporting selected business incubators in stimulating entrepreneurship, creating and consolidating new innovative startups in Eastern and Southern Africa. There are currently 4 pilot country projects, Angola, Ethiopia, Madagascar and Somalia, and we hope to expand the network to involve other countries. So indeed, just an example of some of the current tools in place. But coming back to the Pacific question, yes, I think we really believe that it's all about providing tailored services that can really add value to helping young businesses to flourish. And of course, there is a lot of talk about having mentoring programs, as you mentioned, with sort of general aspects such as value proposition, business model, marketing, etc. But I think it's very important to sit down and understand what are the problems and how can we help. And so more practical examples of tailored solutions could be things, and we're doing this in the project BIC Africa, such as soft landing programs, where we can bring to Europe young entrepreneurs who can spend short periods of time inside business incubators, who can really help them to develop access to markets and partners and, of course, finance. And as always, Treasure, it's a two-way bridge as well. And it's very important to stress this. And I know, for example, there are now even in Europe some accelerator programs which are preparing startups from Europe to enter the African market. So I think in terms of the job creation and creating new business, timing is very relevant, and there is a real opportunity to look at creating value and growth between the two continents. And indeed, even now, one thing we're looking at a little bit is even the thought of having global startups. There are some startups that are now contacting entrepreneurs in different parts of the world and setting up global companies from the go. So that's another aspect which is very important. And also, yes, we find, and this morning actually I started my day at 8 o'clock speaking to an incubator in East Africa, and it's all about co-designing and co-delivering mentorship programs. And yes, it's very important that we understand how can we help exactly, and working both with European and African incubators, because we know incubation works. It is a successful tool, and the mentoring aspect is very important. And it needs to be done on a co-design and co-delivery aspect. Thank you for the moment.
Thank you very much. What a fascinating conversation, the challenge that has been raised, and in terms of shifting mindsets, and already we can see that BIC Africa and the EBN is thinking already in the same direction, the co-creation opportunities. Thank you very much for that. Ms. Hilda, you have the floor now to come in and share your experiences on this.
Thank you so much, and thank you, everyone. I think when I think about the African Youth Challenge, I typically like to address it with using the 4 E's. So just indulge me, it's another framework. But there's a number of issues. One, there's education, which we've spoken about a lot. There's employment, there's entrepreneurship, and there's empowerment. And all these things work together to improve the young African person's life. When you talk about PPP, from an education perspective, I think it's been mentioned around the curriculum, historically. This is a 60-year-old conversation. I'm not sure that it's something we can solve tomorrow. However, there's a room for the private sector to step in as part of education in the upskilling. You go to university, or maybe you don't, you're a 16-year-old, you have some skills that need to be finessed. There is a room for the private sector to say, I am going to focus on 16-year-olds who can be carpenters, who can be welders, and get them to that point of skilling. Or I am going to focus on a university graduate who has theory, 100% first-class degree, but cannot do anything in the workplace. I'll focus on that. That's the first opportunity. And in doing so, a lot of care has been taken. One, conduct the right skills gap analysis, right? What's the actual skills gap? We often jump to large conclusions about what's needed in the workplace in Africa or in jobs in Africa. There's lots of things that we'd love to be doing because they're futuristic and very cool. But when you look at what's missing in the market, it's the basics. It's carpenters, it's nurses, it's admin people, it's agriculture technicians. A good example example is this, like 2 weeks ago, Uganda's final investment decision with Total Energies on the upstream oil and gas was released. And one of the things they mentioned that stuck out for me was the fact that for the pipeline to be successful, they need 15,000 welders. And today, Uganda has only 4,000 certified welders. You know, nobody's thinking about welders in the same breath as AI, but it's just as important, if not even more. And that's on education. The second is on employment. And here there's many issues. One, there is, how do you get to a place where we've got transparent access to opportunities? We've grown up in an environment where there's lots of cronyism, where you see the civil service without transparency, you see nepotism. People have become uncertain in their skills simply because there's no democratized access. One thing the private sector can do is to commit to transparent recruitment processes. If you're hiring people into your organization, have a very clear criteria on how they come in, open it as wide as you possibly can, and bring the very best people for the right job. The more the private sector encourages this, one, it could cross over to government, but also reignite the hope of young people who are trying to get into an employment that, hey, there's a fair path for me then. This is where I start from. If I apply to this graduate recruitment program, there's no nepotism. If I'm good and put in the hard work, I'll get the reward. I think young African people looking for jobs need to see that and see that at scale, because for the longest time it has not been role modeled. The third thing, now the third E, entrepreneurship, right? And this for me is important because I think the Mo Ibrahim Foundation did some research a while ago that showed that in Africa today, 3 million jobs are created annually, yet we need 80 million jobs. The clear message there is there's more opportunity for entrepreneurship than for employment, and that's a fact we have to realize. But for a young African person, the term entrepreneur is extremely intimidating, and he spoke about it. How do I pay taxes? How do I register? But we can create a path that leads them there that starts from solopreneurship. If you think about the world post-COVID, young people all across the globe, including in Africa, are not necessarily excited about jobs, because we're beginning to understand that if I have the right skills and I'm taught how to access markets, I can go into a social media platform or an e-commerce platform, I can position myself and I can sell. For this to be successful, the right skills, naturally, the right tools, very important. We run a program, a training program, where we integrated with Coursera. It was a 6-month plan, build it into Coursera, etc. Nobody used it because they can't afford the data. We're now training 30,000 people using WhatsApp. Because WhatsApp, you need 5 MB for conversation. Coursera, you need 5 GB for the same course. So what are the right tools, and are we using them? And then finally, access to markets. Africa has done this before. There's a time we mandated a percentage of women in each class, a percentage of women in each degree program at university. We can also mandate a percentage of contracts that go to young people if you're issuing a big contract, and that's it. Last thing is empowerment, that ability to let young people in Africa know that they can do it, that a good job is not doctor, lawyer, that TVET is the way to go because it gives you a shorter path, and knowledge that nothing is holding you back, truly you are free. It's a mindset thing, but we have to deal with it as well.
Thank you very much. Wonderful intervention. I think you have summarized so many powerful insights that have also been resonating in the conversation, especially from your own experience, and thank you very much for that. Now I'd like to turn to Pablo. Pablo, you now have the opportunity to add your thoughts on this topic. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Treasure. So I think I have a different background here, and so perhaps a different angle and perspective. First of all, it's true, I'm an open source hacker, serial entrepreneur, focusing on startups. But in terms of innovation and creativity, I've been at the receiver's end regarding Africa. So Africa has given me much more than I've given to Africa. I'll give you an example. So during COVID, Spain had one of the strictest lockdowns in all the world. And thanks to an African open source platform called Ushahidi, Kenyan platform, we were able to rapidly deploy hyperlocal, neighbor network support for people to find volunteers or people in need during those very harsh times where you actually got issues around, just getting out your house, funding a pharmacy, doing the groceries, or just receiving some counsel. That Frena la Curva project has received many awards in terms of innovation in the European Union. But it was thanks to Ushahidi and the team in Kenya that we actually got to very quickly deploy that, not only in Spain, but in other countries in Europe and in Latin America. So that's my context, and so I've received much more than I've given back. Now, to the point, it's interesting how we typically use the term tool in this metaphor, and we typically go to funding, training, and skills. But I would like to actually go and speak about tools themselves, like the actual thing. I think skills matter, you know, and training is important to encourage motivation and talent. But what about the tools themselves? And there comes a point where we can have all the skills we can, and all the training, and even the funding, and then the digital tools that are available are neglected. Not in a way that we don't think they're important, but they don't address the specific use cases and needs for a settled, you know, population, right? So I'll give you one example of that. One of such tools, when you're in the creativity and innovation space, is a design tool, right? When you have this inception, mock-ups, prototypes, design, especially if you are in the internet arena or the app world, designing something is very important. It's in the critical path of innovation. Now, the fact is that when we ask designers in Africa about those tools that are available to them, they will tell us that they are that they have, you know, related to stakeholders and non-designers. Those tools are often the bottleneck. The conversation gets stuck, and the project gets basically end of the line. So it is very sad and unfair that tools are probably responsible to a certain degree of many of those, you know, exciting projects and then failure. But not because of the skills or the talent or the funding, but because of the design process and creativity process itself. So to make matters worse, when we further ask African designers and technologists whether they believe the tools they are using are biased towards a specific, you know, decision-making or solution-driven mindset, you know, I'd like to remind yourself that everyone here is using Silicon Valley, you know, propelled tools. What they say is that they have never had the chance to even ask themselves that question. How much bias is there in the tool itself so that your particular problem or solution is not well addressed for you, right? So it's interesting because we use an African technology that was not meant to address a strict lockdown in pandemic times. It was, you know, meant to address natural disasters or civil conflicts, you know, so pinpoint, it was geolocation efforts. So it's interesting how we even got to be able to mutate or evolve that African technology to suit our needs. But is it true? Can we do that the other way? So I would like to make sure that as an entrepreneur myself developing designers tools, I want to ask African designers, technologies, startup you know, initiatives, what are their needs, so we make sure that the tool we develop actually is for them. And they are not biased or constrained in any way, because at the end of the day, we know that tools at this stage are accelerating the way, as you know, the way that people team together, collaborate, and at the end of the day, really create successful businesses.
Excellent. That is such a very deep thought that you have put into this conversation. I really appreciate that. I believe you're just a bridge builder, very much so. And as you speak, I'm sure that people in the audience and here, it resonates, this idea that we really have to be more thoughtful about tools and how we build them and who do they serve? Are they targeting the needs? Thank you very much for bringing that perspective. Now, we want to move forward, and I want to apologize because it's such an exciting discussion, but we have limited time. So I'm going to ask the next two speakers whose brains we want to pick as well. They're joining us online and they've been very patient. Mr. Gregory Clemente and Ms. Cynthia Aïssy, I'd like you to share with us your thoughts on bridging the digital and finance gap. You know, digital and financial inclusion, I know certainly in my world as the AETrade group, we come across and work on these issues every day. But for the audience, I'd like you to share, what do you think is the major challenge in terms of access to digital and finance opportunities, especially for young and women entrepreneurs? Share your views on how you think development finance institutions could change the narrative and craft perhaps more appropriate tools to address this target group? And also, how do we change the perception of risk and overcoming them in sectors like agriculture? I take agriculture because it's a major sector in Africa as well. And is there a view that you have on how to enable financial entities to provide access to finance for MSMEs, including the informal sector? So these are some of the questions, many questions that we have, but over to you. I'll ask Mr. Clemente, if you want to go first. Go ahead.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much. I hope you hear me. I prefer to speak in French, but so sorry for that. Merci beaucoup tout d'abord pour cette invitation et cette participation à ce panel. Pour répondre, et ce sera le cas de mon intervention, ce que je voudrais dire en tant que Proparco, donc filiale de l'Agence française de développement dédiée au financement du secteur privé, c'est que le groupe AFD dans son ensemble propose énormément de choses, énormément de programmes d'accompagnement qui sont très complets et qui permettent de faciliter le financement des PME africaines. Je vais parler d'abord de la régulation des PME avec par exemple les Startup Act ou les SMEs Act, et puis bien sûr les programmes d'incubation, la formation, notamment pour les futurs dirigeants. Et donc, nous avons en place un certain nombre de programmes, comme les programmes de notre campus qui est basé dans le sud de la France à Marseille et qui est bien sûr à la disposition des futurs chefs d'entreprise. On a bien sûr des programmes de financement en equity, en dette, en monnaie locale et bien sûr dans les phases early stage, donc tout ce qui concerne véritablement l'amorçage ou encore la croissance des entreprises. Donc, financement des PME, eh bien, ce n'est pas uniquement un sujet de financement, comme vous le savez, mais c'est également un sujet d'accompagnement des entrepreneurs et de soutien à un écosystème, à la création d'un environnement qui doit être favorable à la croissance des PME. Donc, afin de répondre à ces besoins, nous, on a un partenariat avec l'Union européenne et ce partenariat, il est crucial pour développer notre approche globale. Notre partenariat avec l'UE, il est stratégique donc pour le soutien des startups et des PME en Afrique. L'intérêt de l'Union européenne pour le secteur privé, on l'a vu, il s'est affirmé au cours des années et je pense dès le plan d'investissement européen le PIE de 2018, notamment par le lancement de son outil de garantie Fed, IFSD, qui vise vraiment l'appui aux acteurs privés. Aujourd'hui, donc la Commission, elle se positionne très fortement avec la dotation de 14 milliards d'euros qui est faite dans la nouvelle version de cet outil IFSD+. Et ça va permettre d'être un véritable game changer. Je pense qu'on n'en a pas encore complètement conscience, mais pour l'ensemble du secteur privé africain, du plus petit acteur au plus gros acteur économique, il existe au niveau européen des acteurs du financement privé efficaces et crédibles, comme les DFI, en synergie avec l'Union européenne. Et en faisant alliance avec la Commission, eh bien les capacités à financer le secteur privé africain vont être démultipliées. Et ça, je pense que c'est la bonne nouvelle. Maintenant, à nous d'être au rendez-vous et d'accompagner les porteurs de projets sur le continent. Ils sont nombreux et ils nous attendent. Donc voilà, ce partenariat, il a débuté pour Proparco en 2015. Il illustre une complémentarité forte avec les outils européens et notamment vis-à-vis des PME. Je vais accélérer mon propos, mais simplement pour dire que nous, on a démarré notre relation avec l'UE en 2015. On a déjà déployé plus de 200 millions d'euros de l'Union européenne, sur lequel, bien sûr, on a bâti un effet de levier. Vous avez entendu peut-être parler du programme Choose Africa. Avec Choose Africa, nous avons accompagné plus de 26 000 entreprises sur le continent. Je pourrais vous donner des exemples, si vous le souhaitez, d'entreprises qui ont été accompagnées. En même temps, on a mobilisé des programmes de garantie de l'Union européenne, avec, par exemple, le programme EURIS. Et avec le programme EURIS, qui a démarré en 2018, eh bien 130 millions d'euros de garanties ont été apportés à des banques locales dans les pays africains et pour qu'elles financent les TPE et les PME, et ce sont 5000 PME qui ont été ainsi accompagnées. Donc on le voit bien, on a un partenariat avec l'UE qui est extrêmement important. On l'a développé dans les énergies, dans l'agriculture avec un programme comme AgreenFi. Dans la création de marchés, je pense à l'accès à l'énergie, notamment au off-grid. Aujourd'hui, on a un programme qui s'appelle ARESUF avec l'Union européenne qui nous a permis aussi d'être actionnaire d'un certain nombre de startups dédiées à l'off-grid. Voilà, je pense que l'ambition aujourd'hui, elle est là. Les outils sont là. La prise en considération de la nécessité de renforcer les écosystèmes, c'est également extrêmement présent et beaucoup plus. Il y a une vraie prise de conscience autour de cela. Je pense que nous, on va pouvoir se positionner davantage sur les petits tickets, sur les phases d'amorçage. Et enfin, ça sera sans doute la nouvelle frontière, et je conclurai mon propos par cela. Ça sera notre capacité, fort des leviers que nous propose l'Union européenne, d'aller chercher des investisseurs européens ou internationaux pour orienter leur épargne vers les objectifs de développement durable sur le continent africain. Et ça, c'est extrêmement important parce que c'est de cette manière-là qu'on sera à l'échelle des enjeux africains.
Merci beaucoup. J'ai suivre ce que vous avez dit. Malheureusement, mon français c'est pas assez au courant. Mais but I think the most important thing that I understood was that you really value your partnership with the European Union, and because of that partnership, you've been able to impact on thousands of SMEs and startups in Africa. And I think the idea of an ecosystem is extremely important, and you've emphasized this as well as the importance of providing financing of different types. It's not just one size fits all, but different instruments that you have been using. I think if we had more time, I would like to challenge you a bit further and say, but are these instruments really accessible? Do you think that there's more that could be done to improve the accessibility of what already exists? So maybe let's go around and ask Cynthia to speak, and when we finish, if I have a chance, I'll come back to you. Because I think the question is really being asked from the perspective that there's a lot that seems to be available as programs, as funding. However, the intended beneficiaries are not yet satisfied that it is easy for them to access. Thank you very much. Cynthia, you have the floor. Perhaps you want to talk more also about financial inclusion, but I'm also keen to know about the digital inclusion aspect that I know you've been working on. Over to you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Treasurer. So yes, I will talk about my own experience in terms of innovation. So my company, Keyops Tech, is specializing in digital deliveries of parcel in Africa, and thanks to a large territorial, let's say, network and partnership with local, I would say, formal and informal transport companies, and the development of an application. And it is an application which can work offline, as we are implementing this solution in the rural environment. So we allow delivery of packages in places where which are difficult to access, and my activity is subject to strong local constraints. So especially issues on access to digital tools and to internet connection. And we are aware that we must consider the local reality of the continent in order to evolve our business, as we are now present in mainly in Côte d'Ivoire, in Mali, in Senegal, and in Ghana. So I would like to highlight three specific points. The first is we need to take local realities into account. It is very important. And on the continent, the main challenge is to build digital solutions that adapt to local realities. So that's why I was explaining that, yes, we want to innovate. We want to digitalize a specific field, but we need to take into account all the constraints. And that's why I was saying that our system can work offline. So you can create, as a transporter, a parcel, even though the connectivity is not working for a moment. So we are facing poor connectivity. We have difficulties in accessing network and connection tools, so telephone, computers, and the cost also of internet access are continent-specific issues that cannot be ignored. I think these realities must be considered in order to build relevant and adapted digital solutions. The second point is to propose alternative solutions. So I think solutions can be developed such as the use of older, maybe generation networks. We are talking about 4 and 5G, but I think we can use older generation networks such as 2G to facilitate the use of certain applications, mainly in the area where there is issue in terms of connectivity. And the continent can also develop alternative technologies such as Li-Fi technology to provide internet access in remote areas not covered by cellular or fibers, for example, networks. And I think by providing this alternative solution, we can reduce the impact of the connectivity issues and continue to provide digital services and innovation to the population. The third point is regarding my experience of Keyops Tech. Our field work at Keyops Tech in the transportation sectors. This has allowed us to see that the best digital innovation are tools that come closer to the needs of people. So the application we have developed relies on relays such as the existing transport network and a massive territorial network to be effective. So ultimately, the development of digital innovation on the continent must be accompanied by physical solution complementary to digital solution. We talk a lot about training. We talk a lot about how to invest in human capital. And I'm not talking about finance, but investing in human capital by having, for example, a team dedicating on field every day. So to help them to make this transition, it is very, very important. And I know that connectivity issues in Africa are temporary, and we are phased in the digital future of Africa. So the figures show, according to the GSMA report, that the number of mobile subscribers in Africa will grow by 4% over the period between 2019 to 2025, from 477 million subscribers to 614 million subscribers in 2025. So this figure also shows that the company must continue to innovate despite the constraints, because this will soon be exceeded. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing your very important experience, especially bringing in the population. Majority of the population in Africa is rural, and I think such experience and solutions that you're bringing are very important. Unfortunately, we are run out of time, and I wanted to have a Q&A at this point. In fact, I'm looking, there's so many comments, but there's a question and that has come up, and I'm not sure if anybody is able to address it, but I want to acknowledge it because it's such an important one. It says, what is currently being done by the EU-Africa Business Forum to assist the developing country youths who have a passion in the blue economy sector? African institutions are not well equipped in marine engineering and naval architectural activities. Is there anybody who'd like to jump in and comment on this, or do we just want to acknowledge that this is an important question and perhaps we can follow up later with a response? Anybody? Well, I think the silence says something. Do you want to jump in? In fact, and that's actually the point. I think this is a point. What I think has been raised is that we need to be sure ensure that, you know, in our cooperation, that such topics also have an opportunity to feature. So thank you very much for that question. It's well noted. And now, because we have almost run out of time and we are going to cut off, we have come to the end of this very exciting exciting debate, and I don't know how to conclude so many important points that have been raised about how we must invest in human capital, how we must ensure that we address the challenges of the needs that are actually manifest on the ground, not what we think are the needs, and how the bridges that are being built between Africa and Europe through institutions and the work that's being done have potential to be scaled up. And finally, how finance matters and how to be inclusive about it, as well as also taking advantage of well thought through tools to be able to solve the problems that we face. So I know that we normally would have 1 second for each speaker just to say the last word. I'm also informed that in this program we were to show some videos. I just need some guidance on whether that will still be done, whilst I quickly go around the panel and ask for 30 seconds, a final message in terms of your takeaways from this session. I'll go through each one just one by one, starting at the end, and I'll end with you, Commissioner. You'll have the last word. Thank you. Please, Pablo, 30 seconds.
I think my takeaway is that it is important that hackers, developers, designers in Europe have open ears and listen and ask the right questions to African entrepreneurs and activists, so we make sure that their win is also our win.
Thank you. Please go ahead.
For me, I think it to be still on empowerment. Young African children were, for the most part, not given a chance to dream. They either grew up war or post-war, and their parents grew up with a very strict idea of what a job is. You're a doctor, you're a lawyer, you're an engineer, or you're nothing. And in the new world, we need to have systematic ways of changing this mindset. TVET is where opportunities are. You don't need a university degree to earn a decent living. You don't need a formal job to earn a decent living. This is an empowerment of the mind, and we really need to focus on hammering that down.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I would add exactly to this also my position regarding the necessity to learn also from good experience of other states, not only looking on their own belly as the European Union might sometimes does. The German government has a program that's called Invest for Jobs for Africa, and it invests directly in creating jobs in investments done by European, not only German companies in Africa. That is very successful, as well as also our Belgian member over Ondernemers for Ondernemers. They have small tickets of support and can give here direct business coaching and address the needs.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to cut you because we're just going to be cut off in a second. Please, Robert.
Just one other question saying, do incubators work? I think they do. It's not about infrastructure, but the support and the team. And think about, a tennis player. They all need a coach and there's a little bit of support to get successful startups going. Thank you.
Thank you.
My final word is to make sure that if we want to support young African entrepreneurs, we have to be ready to include them in the processes, in policy development processes, and to really give them a seat on the table where decisions that will affect their businesses are being made.
Thank you. So we have it all. Now I think we've come to the end of this session. May I be guided? Can we now move to... No, this is it. All right. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank the panelists, but last word, Commissioner.
Two ideas to take away. Contextualize solutions to the continent and to parts of the continent. Include young people in all discussions to that end. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That brings us to the end. Can we give a round of applause to everybody?